The Devil Wears Prada 2 is directed by David Frankel, the director of the first film, and it once again stars Anne Hathaway, Meryl Streep, Stanley Tucci, and Emily Blunt. And in this sequel to the 2006 classic, as Miranda Priestly nears retirement, she reunites with Andy Sachs to face off against her former assistant turned rival, Emily Charlton. I absolutely love the first Devil Wears Prada. I think it's a 10 out of 10 movie, no flaws. It's a real comfort watch to me. And I went into the sequel excited but cautiously optimistic mainly. Long-awaited sequels have a really bad track record, and I was concerned that this movie was going to continue that trend. But I am so happy to say that The Devil Wears Prada 2 is a worthy sequel to the original. And seeing as this is a film about people dressing nicely, I thought it should wear something nice special attire there. Looking very smart. I am, however, going to remove the sunglasses because I really don't like wearing them indoors. So as I said, The Devil Wears Prada 2 was a worthy sequel to the original. Not as good as the original. I do have a few flaws which I will get into. But what I do appreciate is that for a cash grab sequel, which this obviously is, it does try to expand on the themes in the original, and it really does work. This is not a rehash of the first film, like many legacy sequels are. It actually delves into its own themes, mainly about the state of businesses, journalism, the fashion industry mainly, and the sneaky deals that go on behind the scenes. And what I really liked about this film is that it takes the time to show how certain business dealings affect everyone, lower class, middle class, the higher ups, and what makes people like Miranda Priestly so likeable and relatable in this film in particular is that the main threat of this film is above her, so she really cannot win. She has to be really smart, smarter than ever in this film to try and overcome it. And what I also really appreciated is that the film shows that these characters have grown up in the last 20 years and certain personality traits have changed. This is something a lot of legacy sequels don't do, and if they do it, they do it in the complete wrong way. Andy is finally a successful journalist until something happens, and Miranda, while still being the sleazy boss that we all know and love, she kind of respects certain employees just a little bit more. Maybe she's learned that off the experience in the first film. And then you've got my boy Nigel, aka the best character in these films, and you can tell he has a lot more respect for certain people now. It was just really refreshing to see that characters are allowed to grow off screen, which is something I think a lot of writers of these legacy sequels really need to learn. They can't remain the same character for 2 movies in the span of 20 years. They have to change in some way. I also think the film does a good job at making you understand why Andy returns to Runway. That was something I was really concerned about going into this, but I do think overall they give a genuinely good reason, and I like that they continue to make her really relatable with her still struggling in journalism. Unfortunately, Andy is stuck with the worst plotline in this movie. There's a plotline with a guy who she really likes, he owns some flats and she buys one, and they get together and it's really nice. But I just couldn't care less about this plot line. It just felt really forced in there. It was an obvious replacement for Nate because they couldn't get the actor for him back in this movie. So they just thought, oh, we need some romance in this movie, just shove a random guy in there and it'll work. But the best characters in this movie are easily Nigel and Emily. Nigel especially. You are really rooting for him in this movie because of how his story ended in the previous film. And I really liked how his arc showcased the really rough side of the fashion industry, how it's a really cutthroat business, and that even if you're the hardest working person there, there's a chance that you might not get the position that you really want. And I do think those themes about modern business work really well with Emily as well, and how she was treated after the first movie. And I really liked her and Miranda's new dynamic. That was very interesting. So overall, despite a few ideas and plot lines that I didn't really get into, I thought the narrative of this movie was very solid and a natural continuation to the first movie. The technical aspects though, they leave a little bit to be desired. To put it nicely, this film looks pretty poor. It really does. Compared to the first film where it looks really grainy and the sets look real, this movie looks very digital. There's certain scenes where someone's just in a corridor and it looks like they're standing in front of a green or blue screen, especially one shot where Andy and Emily are going into a hotel room. The background behind them just looks so fake. And then there's moments where characters are in a car and it's just green screen all over the windows. I just miss the days where movies and sets look real. Like, why can't we have that back? We have really good technology now. Why can't we do that anymore? It really is a trend that needs to die in Hollywood. So many films now just look so fake and it's getting annoying. It's taking the realism out of films. I really did like the editing of this film though. This film is 2 hours long. I can tell you now, it felt like 90 minutes. This film flew by really well. And I really like the use of crash zooms in this movie. They work so well for comedic effect, and it just reminded me of the old 2000s movies as well, especially the original film. And this is just a personal preference, but I didn't like the music in this movie that much, and it's mainly because it's modern pop music, and I've said many times, I am not the biggest fan of modern pop music. But finally, the acting in this movie was absolutely fantastic once again. The main cast brought their A game to this movie, especially Stanley Tucci, who was easily the standout for me. I have always loved Nigel as a character, and I think Stanley Tucci is just so good in this role, and just like the other characters, I appreciate that he tweaked his personality and his beliefs just a little bit. Anne Hathaway as Andy Sachs is still lovable and extremely beautiful as the character. Meryl Streep is still fantastic as Miranda Priestley, still delivers that strong presence, and Emily Blunt as Emily is still the really egotistical woman that we all know and love. So overall, I thought The Devil Wears Prada 2 was a worthy sequel to the original. It's not as good as the first film, and quite frankly, it was never going to be. That film is a 10 out of 10, it was never going to top it, but it still finds a way to expand on the themes of the original and introduce very relevant themes to today. And yes, it does have some pointless subplots, and I don't think it looks as good as the original, but overall, I had a great time, and I am going to give The Devil Wears Prada 2 an 8.5 out of 10. And there we go, people. That is the end of the review. If you have seen The Devil Wears Prada 2, do let me know your thoughts on it. Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know. But I hope you all enjoyed this video, guys. Have a good day. And that's all.